What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Mayrand podcast. Today, for episode number 10, my guest is Nick Martini. Nick is a legend, both as an ex-professional skier, having filmed with Poor Boyz, TGR, and Stept, but also as a filmmaker, being the founder of Stept Productions. We discussed his youth, how he got to be a pro skier, the ups and downs of being a pro athlete in action sports, and the whole story of Stept Productions, how they started filming skiing for fun at 12 years old, eventually made some of the most influential free ski movies ever, and are now a full-on business with a bunch of employees working with small brands like Oakley, the NFL, Nike, and Ford. It was really good to chat with Nick about all of that, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's go. Mr. Martini, what's up?
Hey man, doing good. Sitting in LA on the West Coast here. COVID's terrible. Hanging at home, laying low.
Yeah, man, thanks for coming on. I'm glad to talk to you. You're one of the guys that when I knew I was doing a podcast, I wanted to talk to because you've done so many great things into skiing. And also for myself as a filmmaker, you're really kind of an inspiration because not only have you done great things, but you've had some of the most success anyone has had out of the ski industry. So it's really good to talk to you.
Thanks, man. Well, yeah, start to chat. Should be good.
Yeah, I wanted to go all the way through with you, start from the beginning and just talk about your whole story. I know that you grew up in the Boston region. Tell me a bit about that. What was your upbringing like?
Yeah, I grew up right outside of Boston in a suburb, and grew up in a family of skiers, honestly. I spent a lot of my time as a child up in northern New Hampshire, growing up skiing at Cannon Mountain, which was sort of home base. And my parents were big skiers, and my brother and I just took to it from, as soon as we could walk, we were on skis. So I grew up in Boston, but probably spent like half of my childhood actually up in northern New Hampshire. And then by the time I got to high school, I actually moved up to New Hampshire to go to school. At a place called Holderness School, which allowed us to ski 6 days a week, which was epic. And we were closer to the snow. So yeah, pretty much my whole childhood was spent either in Massachusetts or New Hampshire, and not far south of you guys. Spent a lot of time up in Quebec too. I remember, like 13 going up there for D-Jams at Valley du Parc. And that's when I first met Phil when I think I was like 12 or 13 years old, like crazy young.
Yeah, you were making moves at a young age.
Yeah.
Were you ever into some other types of skiing, like moguls, racing, or stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a good call. I mean, I grew up ski racing pretty much until high school. Till I was like 13 maybe, or 14. And I actually had a lot of success in ski racing. Like I loved it. It was super fun. I was doing super well. But I think it was when I went to a ski camp when I was 13. I'd like started watching the Poor Boyz movies, and I like Happy Days. I remember I got obsessed with, and started doing freestyle on the side, like outside of racing, and then ended up going to a summer camp in Whistler. At the time it was SMS, which was now Momentum. And after I came back that summer, I was like, there's no way I'm ski racing again. Like I'm definitely making the leap. So it was sort of then like 12, 13, 14, I switched over full time to more of the park and pipe stuff. But I love ski racing growing up. It was sweet, super fun.
Were you also doing park at that time, like switching off between park skiing and racing, or?
For sure. There's definitely laps through the park in a GS suit doing backflips and shit at one point. And I think that's sort of like the beginning of the end of the racing shit. As soon as you start jumping, you realize that there's a whole different world out there that's a lot more fun.
Yeah, that was the exact same thing for me of like going to another hill to do a race, but spending the whole day in the park.
Yeah.
And when it was our time to do our run, then we'd suit up, but we'd bring our twin tips.
Yeah, I feel it, man.
So, the first time I noticed you or I heard about you as someone who might be a bit younger was your Super Unknown.
Yeah.
In I think 2008 with the Lil Wayne song.
Yeah, I think I did Super Unknown 2 or 3 times. Never one, unfortunately. John Brogan lives in LA now. I was with him a couple nights ago, and we still always get drunk and joke about Super Unknown. But yeah, I did a couple times, and those were super fun. That was like the dream, because I know Mike Clark, who skied with me in New Hampshire. We grew up skiing together. He won, and it like blew up his career. Like he got to go shoot with Level 1 and all this shit, and we were like still in high school. So I always thought that was like the way to break through, and unfortunately never made it happen. But it was always fun shooting those parts.
Yeah, well, plus the one I'm talking about specifically was the year after Wallish. So
Yeah.
Wallish was such a big like boom out of nowhere of like getting big at like in such a short amount of time that I remember that year that Brogan won, and I was like, okay, is that the next Wallish? Because you had kind of the same, Wallish was with that Biggie song, and it was really high energy, and then you came in with that Lil Wayne song, and I remember I was like, holy shit, okay, Nick Martini, okay.
That's funny, man. Yeah, those were the good days. That was awesome. That was probably like right towards the end of high school, or maybe my first year out in Colorado.
Yeah, I think you were in Colorado because you had a couple of urban shots that transfer K-Fed in Boulder.
That might have actually been my senior year in high school because I started living in Boulder. The school is crazy. The Holderness, like if you did winter sports, they were super flexible. So I spent like my whole senior winter more or less in Colorado living with my brother when he was going to Boulder. It's my last year in high school, so we're filming a bunch of street stuff out there, and then got the chance to go to school at Boulder too, which was awesome to get out of New Hampshire and do some real skiing for a bit. It's sweet.
Yeah, I bet. At that time, you were filming with Stept, the company you created with your brother. Is that right?
Yeah, and we started making films together super young. I mean, people still like don't even really believe it. Sometimes like our first film was Stept the movie in 2001, so 20 years ago, and I was only 12 years old, and we made like a real film, put it on DVDs, which was crazy at the time. And then that sort of started just more as like hobbyists doing an annual ski film every winter. And it went from that 2001 all the way 14 years or something. So 2014, and we never missed a winter. So all through middle school and high school, through college, we did our annual films. And by the time we got to college, they started being on a different level. It was a bit more of a professional thing with some support behind them. But at the start, it was really me and my brother, and then Cam Riley as well was one of the first people we met in high school. And the three of us just were making the films for fun. And that's also how I met most of the people in the ski community, was through shooting films. Like Phil, for instance, him and Henrik are in our first films. Phil even earlier than Henrik. I think we have footage of Phil in one of the first Stept movies where he's like 10 years old or 11 years old. It was like crazy. But yeah, it was really just a passion. It's like we'd just shoot everything we skied, and we got more and more into the ski movie thing as time went. Like on the East Coast, I started shooting with Meathead Films. Started learning a bunch from those guys because at the time they were like pretty damn good at what they did. It was like local East Coast films, but I loved them, so I was really inspired by those guys. And then once we made it out to Colorado, I started skiing in the Poor Boyz films. And the TGR films, while all doing the Stept stuff simultaneously. So I started sort of like doing a couple different film projects every year, but Stept was always like our main focus because it was our own films that we really cared about. So
you say that you started at 12 years old. At that point, did you have some inspiration of seeing ski movies and saying like, oh, I want to do the same thing and emulate it? Or was it just like, hey, I'm going to go and film my brother and we're just going to film both of us skiing?
Yeah, it was definitely emulating. Like I grew up at that age. I think it was when Happy Days was the first Poor Boyz movie I sort of bought and got obsessed with. Then I went back to like the Propagandas of the world and became a huge fan of Johnny's filmmaking. But between that and then also it was the same time like the CKY videos and Jackass videos were coming out. We loved skateboarding. At the time, I was a big skateboarder, so we were inspired growing up, always watching skate movies and Jackass and the ski movies. So even from when I was like 8 or 9, I think we got hooked on action sports films. So then by the time we could get our first video camera and learn how to edit on like our mom's computer, we were just sort of like already jamming.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the case for you, but for me, ski movies came in a bit later, but our youth was really with skateboarding movies.
Agreed. And I think, at the time there was just so much. I'm trying to remember like what those films were back in the day, like the 411 videos and like, there were some I literally burned through the VHSs watching them. And like at the time, skateboarding was the coolest shit out. So, same inspiration.
Yeah, first time holding a camera and really trying stuff was filming skateboarding and trying to do jackass stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it's like the modus operandi days, like all those films were epic. Yeah, super good inspiration. And honestly, then the ski shit, especially at the time, I feel like Johnny DeCesare. Well, there's a couple other dudes who were starting to do like the hardcore park and pipe films, like who else? There's a couple early movies, but for me, like I'd watched TJR and Warren Miller growing up since I was like 5 years old, and then when Johnny started, I started getting exposed to his films. It just got me super pumped, and then we found Level One. I remember watching like Forward and shit and being like, okay, we got to go jump off some roofs and jump down some stairs and shit.
And now it's time for a first sponsor break. J Skis is a company based out of Burlington, Vermont. Their business model of making limited edition graphic skis that are sold online directly to consumer is super dope. As a fan of original graphics, I love it. They put a lot of effort into making great skis, but also in making them look super good. This season, I'll be skiing on the vacation ski, and I can't wait for some snowstorm to go and try them out in São Paulo. Support companies that support skiing. Support J Skis. You grew up in Boston, got really into skiing, were in a school that really gave you the time to do more of it and get better. At what point did you say, okay, I'm going to move out to college to Colorado and do this kind of full time?
Yeah, I think I like always sort of knew that skiing was going to be a big part of my life, whether it was going to be professionally or recreationally. But I was pushing at the beginning to middle of high school really hard to like try to compete, at 15, 16 years old and see where it could go. And I think the first breakthrough moment was when Solomon did this group of events called the Solomon Jib Academy, where they went around to like 5 places around the country, did these contests. And if you won the contest, then you'd get to go to Mammoth in the spring with like the other kids who won, as well as the whole Solomon pro team, who at the time was like Dumont and Sammy and all these like, from my perspective, like larger than life type characters. So I ended up winning the one in New Hampshire, which was like a dream come true. So I went to Mammoth that spring. And I think I like won the Mammoth thing, or at least got like some honorable mention. I don't know if there was technically a winner, but I remember it was me and Henrik, and then a bunch of other people who ended up being super successful. Like I think like Thomas Kreef, the pipe skier from Europe.
Yeah.
Like we were all 14-year-old kids, but if you look back at the photos, like almost all of those kids ended up skiing professionally or some shit.
Yeah, it's a bit like the super unknown finalists from back in the day. If you look at the 10 finalists, it's all people who've made a big impact.
Exactly. And for whatever reason, whether like I got an honorable mention or won something, the prize was to go to Stockholm to do the King of Style Big Air, which is like their city Big Air. And I was only 15 at the time. It was like insane. And we went that fall. I might have been 16. That's where I met Henrik for the first time, and became friends with him and got to travel with like, I remember Richard Perman won that year. I met like half the ski industry there, met a bunch of the brands. I remember meeting like Greg Strokes from Oakley and getting set up with those guys. And that was sort of like the real year that I started getting some sponsors and started getting the ability to travel. So that was before I was done with high school. I was like, okay, skiing is going to be like a thing. So then I picked school in Boulder because my brother was there and I know they'd let you take half the year off without sort of screwing up your school program. So as soon as I got out there, I'd just go to school in the fall and then ski all winter and ski all summer. And did that program for a long time, just slowly chipping away at college. And then once my injuries begun, that's where I started making some headway in school and finally finished. But yeah, that's sort of how it all came together.
Yeah, it really clicked quickly with sponsors and like stepping up from a young gun to kind of being on the pro level.
Yeah. I think there was a transition moment right when I get to college. My first year doing the US Open, or maybe second year, I ended up getting 4th in slopestyle, like almost made the podium. And I even remember Jenny Naflin from Solomon. I'll never forget that. She's like, shit, Nick, I knew you were good. I had no fucking idea you were this good. It's like a laughable moment. And I remember she always had my back. So that's when they started, giving me a little money and some travel budget and stuff. And Solomon was the first company that really like allowed me to go do photo shoots and film parts and shit like that. And then the rest sort of always snowballs from there. A couple other brands were willing to support what I was doing. And pretty quickly, by like the end of my first year in college, I was skiing pretty much full time all year, had a bunch of sponsors, and we're skiing in a bunch of, at the time, the biggest movies. So I felt like had sort of like made it to that
Yeah.
level, and got into do tour and was competing professionally. And that's how it all like sort of started pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like Solomon was really supporting all in their guys at the time. Like I was talking to Godboo and he
Yeah.
was telling me about his first contract at 14 with Solomon for like over 10,000 euros. And I was like, holy shit, like you
Yeah.
don't see that nowadays. Like you need to prove yourself for 10 years and you might get some budget.
Yeah.
Like, was that some kind of, was that the case for you? Something like that of like getting hooked up and supported really quick?
Yeah, for sure. It was crazy. Solomon at the time, like you're saying, was sort of leading the charge. Like everyone was on their skis. They had just come out with the SPK, which was like the first ski boot that was really meant for park and pipe. And they also had all the biggest talent from Sammy to Simon, Alexi, Dane, Matt Walker. The team was insane. The team was like 25 people at the time of all park skiers. Like it was like half of the ski industry who was like getting hooked up was on Solomon, which was unfortunately sort of short lived. But for the first like 3 or 4 years there, it was amazing. And the team manager, Jenny Naftalin, now Jenny Taylor, was just incredible. She was the coolest chick ever. And she was like our mom. Everyone called her the Solomon Mom. She just took like 10, 18-year-old kids and we just travel around with her. It was awesome.
You were talking about you competed at the Do Tour and big comps like that. I think for a lot of people, what they remember from you in the skiing world is the movie aspect.
Yeah, for sure.
But you also competed in big events, even though it didn't last that long. How was that for you? And what was your perspective? Like, was that a goal of yours to, the whole X Games deal?
Yeah, I think like as much as filming was important to me at the time, I really wanted success in competing and I loved it too. Like I did 2 years on the Do Tour and it was awesome. I never really did pipe besides when I was really little, but I loved slopestyle and I thought that was going to be like a big focus of mine. And I was doing it in tandem with the filming stuff. And then it wasn't until my second year in Do Tour is the first event of the winter. I was like super fired up. I had just learned 2 or 3 different double flips. And I remember at the time, most people who were doing doubles had like one, and I was like, fuck, like I'm set up. Like I got switched up 10, I got forward up 12, I got kangaroo flip. So going into the contest season, I was like on level 12 confidence, which unfortunately can backfire. And it was the first event of the year and I just started skiing way too hard. The weather sucked and I ended up overshooting the first jump in training and blew my ACL, which was sort of like the first of endless setbacks. But that was the first time I'd had a serious injury. And I was super young. I was only like 19 years old. So it was sort of like from my perspective at the time, it was like the end of the world. It was like it was December. I had just gotten all these sponsors and now all of a sudden I couldn't ski for like a year, which was also the catalyst for me transitioning. Sort of like my passion in the film world went from like sort of just hobbyist filmmaking and shooting each other when we had to. I didn't like filming necessarily, being behind the camera. I liked like getting my thing shot, but it wasn't until then when I had that injury that year I got really into production. And it transitioned from like something I had to do to something that I super loved. Like I really loved doing. I produced a web series that winter where I'd travel around to all the Do Tour events and shoot those and sort of like gave that content to my sponsors. And then in tandem, we shot the film Network, which was Step's first, I would say that to me, that was a year that like we stepped up our filmmaking prowess significantly.
Yeah, I concur.
Action and shit, but that was the first time where we took the filmmaking component super seriously, and I sort of dedicated my whole winter to learning how to shoot and shooting new types of cameras. That was like when DSLRs first came out, and that was like my whole world just sort of shifted at that moment to being a lot more interested in production.
And now it's time for a second sponsor break. Planks is a British outerwear brand founded in the French Alps. Yeah, you can ski in the UK, but you probably wouldn't. But these guys are still passionate about skiing, and as someone from Quebec, I definitely relate to that. They don't just make high-quality, good-looking gear that's affordable. They care about the free ski culture too, running grassroots events and sporting skiers that are some of my favorites like Woodsy, Lupe Haggerty, and the Real Skiffy crew. Make sure to check them out at planksclothing.com. Support companies that support skiing. Support Planks Clothing. Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
I still remember that web series you did. One of my favorite edits of all time is from that, when you did kind of a recap of your
yeah,
urban career up to that point with like the Talking Head song.
yeah,
I don't know what that was with that edit, but it had such a good vibe to it with the Road to Nowhere song.
yeah. Nice, man. You got a good memory.
Oh, dude, I'm yeah.
That was a pivotal point in my life for sure. I mean, like my passion for skiing didn't dissipate at all then. I knew I still wanted to ski for years more professionally, but I definitely learned that I had a separate passion as well for filmmaking. And from then on, I became way more hands-on on all the film production we were doing, whether that was with Stept or even with other film companies I was working with, like Poor Boyz and TGR. I started editing my own parts. I helped them shoot the films, and I became really invested in the production component.
And when you got that first ACL injury, it was really at a point where you were blowing up. Like you were making edits and making really a name for yourself. You had a lot of hype on the internet. That year, I think the year before in 2009, you had a great segment in your Stepped movie, but also a great segment in was it Every Day's a Saturday at that point?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah,
So then you come in early season the year after that, and boom, ACL.
so that really just screwed everything up. But luckily, I had a good recovery. Came back skiing hard the next year, but it really was sort of like at the time it didn't seem like it, but I think it was like at the beginning of the end, even though it took a long time. I got I think 5 more years in of video parts and filming, but within that 5 years, it was 4 ACLs, 2 other knee surgeries, 4 shoulder surgeries, a blown spleen, probably half a dozen broken bones, half a dozen concussions. Like every sort of 6 months, I was in the hospital or getting surgery. I had 12 orthopedic surgeries in 5 years, which is insane.
Yeah, stuff that looking back now, you're thinking like, oh, that's so much, but when you're going through it, it's just like one after the other, and
Yeah, you just get it done and get back on your skis and go start chucking yourself until you get broke off again. So it's sort of like a vicious cycle. And it wasn't until years later, like 6 or 7 years later, just a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, when I did my 4th ACL in my left knee, that I knew that I could never really like do any freestyle skiing really. Like even after my 3rd ACL, I was trying to take it easy and I was jumping a little bit. But once my 4th one went, I knew that joint was pretty much done. Like, so at this point I can ski. I go like ski groomer, ski little pal, but I can't jump or anything like that. Or, I straight slide some rails through the park for fun.
And is that something that you miss?
Yeah, of course. Like, I think my life has transitioned a lot. And I'd say at this point, I wouldn't say I miss skiing professionally, but I absolutely miss being able to do things on my skis that were super fun. Like what I'd give to just do a big backflip in jet, or like a cork 7. It would make my fucking day. It would be incredible. Which unfortunately I probably will never get to do again. New thing these days, I've gotten sort of obsessed with snowmobiling just because I can go ski pow with a big machine, and that's pretty fun too.
Yeah, I was asking about your injury because I talked to Paul Bergeron on the podcast.
Nice.
And I don't know if you were aware, but he got a big he got a big injury maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and now he can't really ski because he has damages in his ankles and everything, and just like clipping on a pair of boots like hurts too much. So basically it's it's kind of a shame for people like you guys who are so passionate, and now it's like
it's a bummer, man. I remember when B Paul got all fucked up. I remember he was like in a wheelchair for a minute and stuff, and obviously he was a really good friend of ours in a lot of our films as well. But yeah, it's a bummer. I mean, it sort of comes with the territory at some point. I think some people get super lucky and make it through fairly unscathed. Like Cam Riley has never really had like he broke his ankle 1 year, but other than that, the kid's 31 years old and still jumping off roofs, and he's always fine. So like some people,
crazy,
but more often than not, you put your body through the ringer. Even the people who you're still, I'm impressed. Like Walsh is still skiing. He's done probably 3-4 ACLs between both knees, and he's never like skipped a beat really. Granted, he may not be competing at the level he used to, but he's still hitting big part. I just saw footage of him this morning at Park City, like jumps and shit, and he's kept it alive. And unfortunately, my body couldn't sustain that long, but it was a good run that lasted.
Yeah, and a thing that I like about Wallish is that he has the brand where he could only ski park and do GoPro edits and he would be fine, but he's still pushing the core aspect. Like I saw some stories on Instagram that he was on an urban trip in Des Moines with LJ Stranio
Yeah.
like a couple days ago, and it's like, well, you're in your 30s and you're still doing urban trips. Like, yeah, man, that's cool to see.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's crazy. Cam and Clayton just did an urban trip last winter. I don't even know what it was for. I think maybe one of the TGR movies.
I think it was for Enric's movie.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm thinking of the one the year before that because they've been doing these TGR parts. But yeah, for Salute, they did stuff as well. So yeah, it's crazy, man. I'm impressed.
You've made a good point when you were talking about you getting into filming. When you said that you didn't necessarily like filming at the beginning, and it's something that's really I'm curious about because that was the case with me being like not the best of my crew. So then I would get to be the filmer because I wasn't the one doing tricks. So it was like, hey, Xavier, take the camera because we're the ones who can do tricks. But for you, it wasn't the case. You were the guy that people would film. So how was it to get like for that transition or that whole vibe of like being the athlete but also the filmer?
Yeah, I think for me it was two things. One, like the necessity because I couldn't ski made it more tolerable, but more importantly, it was the transition from the cameras really, where like we spent our whole childhood filming on the Sony cameras, like the VX2100s or the Canon. I think it was like the GL2 at the time. Were basically all the handheld built-in lens, rocker zoom, where for better or for worse, you're not really like doing anything. You're more or less like shooting on a tripod, just following action, which can become sort of like boring and mundane, and there's no like creative fulfillment from it really. Like there's definitely technique and some skill involved, but once we started, that was the same year we transitioned to shooting with DSLRs, where all of a sudden we had like lens choices that we could make the images look different. We had control of our focus manually. We could shoot shallower depth of field. We could start bringing in rigs for dollies and cranes and all these tools, where all of a sudden it became an art more so than just like a TaskRabbit thing where you're just like shooting whatever's happening. So for me, that's when my interest really peaked up, when I realized I could have a ton of creativity, a ton of control in the situation, and also the results. Like when we first got those cameras, we're shooting images that you're like, holy shit, this looks legit. You know, like all you feel like you're shooting a feature film. So I got obsessed, to say the least. Like I was super into it, the gear side, the shooting side. And that's when like that passion sort of grew, like you're saying, from a responsibility to something I actually love doing.
Yeah. And it really showed from how we live in to network.
Yeah.
Like there was a big gap, like as it's that year that you picked up DSLRs and that you went full on into production mode.
Yeah.
And yeah, Stept was already known a lot in the core community, let's say, like on New Schoolers and stuff like that. But as soon as Network was out, like any friends I had who were into free skiing knew you.
Yeah.
And we're like, man, that Clayton Villa part with the Tupac song, like,
yeah.
it's like, how have you seen it recently? Like, how do you look back at it, rewatching it?
Yeah, it's crazy. I would say like once a year, someone pulls up one of the films when we're drinking and we start watching it. And it's obviously like an incredible way to reminisce, but I'm also impressed with a lot of the shit we did. Like some of the film stuff, especially later, like for our last couple films, once we started bringing like real, not drones, but like helicopters into the middle of cities and like doing a lot of work with bigger production equipment where we had like a 20-foot crane mounted in the back of our truck for the whole year. We're doing a lot of dolly work. We're doing a lot of lighting with like bigger lighting for our urban stuff at the end. And I'm still impressed by it. Like it's sort of it's also crazy that none of it was like legal, really. Like we'd go into people's property with huge production equipment and be shooting this stuff without permission, which now working in commercial production in LA, I look back, I'm like, how the hell did we pull that off? It would be actually pretty comical to go try that again sometime and see if we can get away. I think when you're like 22 years old, people have a lot more forgiveness. They're just like, oh, these kids are just whatever, young kids doing their thing. I bet I'd wind up in jail right now if I tried to bring a helicopter in downtown LA and a boom crane on someone's front porch, but who knows?
Yeah. And now it's time for another sponsor break. Treefort Lifestyles is a company based out of Oregon. They've been involved in the ski industry since their inception in 2011 when they made their first pair of suspenders for skiing. They produce some of the nicest accessories you can find out there for your adventure activities, whether you're going skiing, hiking, or traveling. Plus, I've heard their famous suspenders are making a comeback this winter. Go check them out at treefortlifestyles.com and use code Mayrand at checkout to get 15% off your order. Support companies that support skiing. Support Treefort Lifestyles. I've been shooting a bit of urban with Belmar this winter. Nice. And that's the same thing we were talking about is, okay, we're getting old a bit to do some illegal stuff. So we're trying to look for stuff where we won't get into trouble because at 17, it's okay. But at 27, it's kind of,
Yeah, exactly. Cops look at you a little differently.
Yeah. And a thing that I was always thinking about with you guys doing urban in the States is that you guys have a way bigger trespassing culture than here. Whereas in Canada, if you're on someone's yard or whatever, there's not that notion of trespassing. It's really just like, hey, get away or I'll call the cops. But like I saw before talking to you, one of your trailers, you see like Clayton getting handcuffed because he's trespassing. Like it's really on another level.
Oh yeah, that shit, they are super serious about it, especially like the bigger corporate type buildings and stuff. And I'm amazed more people didn't get in trouble. You know, like we had some tickets, like trespassing tickets, and like cops would come and like sort of arrest people, but like not take them to jail or anything like that. But we were definitely doing shit that in the US you could easily get arrested and thrown in jail for. And I think it was just because of our age. Like we're saying, like the cops show up and like, you guys are idiots. Like you're 18-year-old kids, like get the fuck out of here, you know? Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's pretty impressive we didn't wind up with, you know, more serious consequences over the years.
Because I think people are more on edge maybe in the US where I think it's in the 86 trailer that you see a kind of a security guard coming to you and you're shooting at night and he's like, hey, what are you guys doing? And looking back at it now, I see like what he had in mind. Like he doesn't know if someone's like robbing or anything of that nature. Like skiing is the furthest thing in his mind. Like when he comes in and he sees there's a shot where he sees one of you guys, I think it's Max Coram doing a 4-on. And he's like, okay, that's what you're doing. Fine. Okay.
He's like, oh, you're just skiing. I thought you were burying a dead body here.
Yeah.
Super fun times nonetheless. It was pretty epic.
Yeah. And one thing that really was impressive is that on my side, I always found that there was like two types of production companies in skiing. There were like the big ones that made the name for themselves, like in the late 90s or early 2000s, like TGR, Matchstick, Poor Boyz, Level 1. And then there were the new wave, but like you guys and 4x9 and some Quebec crews. And it was really hard to get to step from the small company to the big time boys. And I think you're the ones that did it best. Like you said, of starting off filming yourself with your brother and then putting on some more legit movies, but then ending up like shooting with helicopters and like putting on real damn good productions.
Yeah, it was interesting. Even for us, like I felt like we were close. I never think we really broke, like towards the end of it, I feel like we're on a comparable level with those guys, but they were sort of the incumbents. So like when all the big brands like had the money to invest in films, even to the end, we still always felt like the majority of that was going to the TGRs and MSPs and Poor Boyz because they had this reputation over 20 years and they had become friends with all the brands over time, where we were still sort of like the whatever dirty stepchild up until the last minute. And like we got enough support to make, you know, the dream films come true. But you're right, it was super hard. Like when you have a pretty small industry and a couple big players who have been around forever, to try to like penetrate that is extremely hard. And we're definitely trying.
Yeah, as you said, for sponsorship, I guess it must have been difficult because they have only that much money to spend. And as you said, the priority goes to established relationships. But for the audience, you were really the guys. Because I remember going to IF3 back in the days when it was a real big event, like whole cinema was filled up with like 1,000 people, and like kids were not coming to see the Level 1 or Poor Boyz movie. They were coming to see what the Stept guys did.
That's epic. Yeah, man. I think our generation, I think like, unfortunately for better or for worse, started to like write off the old film companies pretty soon. Like I remember there was a point where I probably said out loud that like all those films sucked, because a lot of the older filmmakers weren't as engaged anymore. And now looking back at it, I think that was naive, and they were just like doing things differently that were like a little bit more accessible. Like I go back and watch the Warren Miller movies now that I used to talk so much shit on, and a lot of them are like great. Like they're all shot on 60 millimeter film beautifully in all these locations. They're just not doing clips, and they're not dressed cool, and they're not like doing urban. So at the time we were like, fuck all those guys. But at the same time, like I still think, the Jones brothers from TGR and Johnny at Poor Boyz and the Matchstick dudes and the Warren Miller dudes are all incredibly talented filmmakers and still are to this day. And I think over the years, since I stopped making ski films, I've gained a lot more respect for all those dudes, because they all are truly super talented.
Do you think it's because of like your age of like growing up and being more mature or older, or it has to do also with maybe you working in that industry and knowing more what it takes to make what they did?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's probably just like when you're doing something new, if you're young and doing something new and different that you think is better, it's very easy to discount what everyone else is doing, and I do think, for better or for worse, a lot of the older generation of action sports films became a bit formulaic, where it's just sort of like ski porn to rock music and segments every year. And our hope was to disrupt that a little bit and try to inject some story, even if it was subtle, some more untraditional music that wasn't just from bands. There was like film scores to like really bring people into that world of us going around into these cities. So I think we thought we were pushing the boundaries of like storytelling within ski movies, even if looking back, it was pretty subtle. We still had rider segments and everything, but maybe that was a component of it. But yeah, I guess just now looking back, I really do appreciate the cinematography. And some of the places that we're shooting, like, were just a lot harder. Like when we're in a city and we pull up with a van and a pickup truck with a bunch of cameras, that's one thing. But to be shooting whatever in some remote mountain in Eastern Europe, like the TGR guys did, and be doing it on film and be shooting aerials, like there's some pretty incredible footage in those guys' archive that I'm still really impressed by. And they were sort of TGR was sort of the first company I found that was bleeding into the commercial world a little bit. And towards the end of my ski career, Todd Jones became a huge mentor for me. Once I found out TGR was doing like proper, bigger commercial production, and I got to go on some of those shoots with Todd, sort of opened my eyes up to this whole different world of filmmaking that wasn't, you and your buddy shooting shit of your friend skiing, but like going on. My first automotive commercial, a Ford commercial with Todd Jones, was insane to look at like how that production was run. And then we went to New Zealand for a North Face broadcast, big TV commercial. And that sort of like opened my eyes, like, holy shit, there's like a whole nother level of filmmaking out there, and it is badass and it's super fun. And that's what sort of inspired a lot of where Stept ended up transitioning down the road,
Yeah, you're talking about that North Face launch when you and Wallish were heli shots in New Zealand. Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah. They rolled down, with like, at the time, no one even had red cameras. It was the red one. They had like 3 red ones, a helicopter, 20-person production crew, producers. I had never even seen any of this shit. So that to me was like super eye-opening. And I got really inspired. And then Todd sort of took me under his wing for, I don't know, a year or two, and really got to show me the ropes, like how that world sort of works. And that's when I think we caught the bug for like that type of production. And yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, I want to talk about that with you, but I don't want to like go back and forth. So let's stick to, well, we were getting at the point talking about you getting your ACL in 2010, and then you get back the year after that, and you put on, I guess, one of the best years you've ever had, because you had a segment in the Poor Boyz movie, in the Stept movie, and in the TGR movie. Yeah,
that was a crazy ass winner. I think that was the winner that's your background right now.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. And that was like, I got my North Face deal that year, which was my biggest endorsement up until that point. And that's when I got introduced to the TGR guys, which was amazing because I'd spent a lot of my childhood skiing in Jackson Hole, and those guys were local legends. And I'd always wanted to work with them. So that was a big step for me to get in with those guys. And then obviously I was really tight with Johnny, so I was doing the Poor Boyz thing. And at the time, the Stept movies were doing well. So it was like a crazy ass winter of trying to shoot with a bunch of different teams and still put out, good parts.
Because
Yeah.
for a skier, putting one great segment in a year is a feat. You've
Yeah.
managed to put 3 in 1 year. Like, I don't know if anyone else has done that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about it, but I don't think so. Like, that's really a crazy feat. Was
Yeah.
that winter, like, did you compete that winter? How was it like?
Yeah, I did. I did the first 2 stops of the Dew Tour, I think, as well as did all that filming. Then I was shooting until like June, I think, in Tahoe, late May, maybe, jumping off huge buildings with the Poor Boyz guys. But yeah, it was a stacked winter, but I was hungry. Like after that injury, I was ready to ski, 200 days a year. And I think, yeah, then we do summer filming. It's just sort of like endless shit, but it was so fun, honestly. I got to travel a ton, and yeah, it's probably the best film year I had. I want to say it ended with an ACL in Mount Hood that summer, but an ACL somewhere soon after, I'm sure, because there were several.
Yeah, because then in 2012, I think there might have been an ACL that summer because in the 86, you weren't in there, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think I had a couple shots at some point, maybe that had bled over from another year. But yeah, then I got back on the filmmaking grind. And I also went back to school after that ACL. So started making some progress in college because I was just like slowly chipping away. But again, just really heavily focused on the production stuff. And the 86 again was an epic film. That's when we started working with Will DeSena, who we still work with today, who's an awesome filmmaker. And he helped shoot that movie with us.
Yeah, that movie was shot so well. Like, I don't know what in particular changed that year, but I just remember that year the shots were so good.
Yeah, we bought a Steadicam that year. And this is wait for all the movies and shit. And a Steadicam is a bitch to work with and to bring around. You got the huge vest, you got to balance it and all this stuff. And we shot almost every spot all year. We like fully set up and built out the Steadicam, and Will ran that thing, for like 50 days that winter. And it definitely changed the whole look and feel of the movies, which was super fun.
Really cinematic.
Yeah, and we had that intro, the single take intro shot.
Dude, that was so dope.
That shit was insane. We got like a 60-foot crane and had Will operate the Steadicam, and then as the team starts walking up the stairs, he steps onto a crane and gets clipped on with a harness and raises up 50 feet and then walks out onto the roof. Yeah, that's probably still one of the more complex single shots I've ever done.
And now it's time for another sponsor break. Access Board Shop is a ski and snowboard shop based out of Saint-Sauveur, Quebec, Canada. They've been in business since 2002 and have supported skiing since day one. From sponsoring numerous athletes to putting on competitions to helping out movie productions, they've done it all. Access is the core board shop, and they've got everything that you might need this season. Check them out at accessboutique.com or go check out their shop in Saint-Sauveur. Support companies that support skiing. Support Access Board Shop. Yeah, I think you guys got to that point with talent because you were great skiers, but that intro is a testament to how much you guys were going all in, because that it's one thing to go all in and produce this sick movie you were producing, but then the intro is really something where you can it's not really important. You can put on some logos and go ahead with the movie, but you guys took the time to plan out an intro and, you went all in.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that was a crazy ass one. That was super fun.
How much planning went into it?
A lot, honestly. And I remember we didn't even know how to permit or anything. We got permission from at the time that building is where Icelandic Skis was, and Public Works Department, and maybe Spider. So the building owner was cool. He was down to do it. And then we choreographed the whole thing ahead of time. And then when the night came and we were ready to rock, we had to set up all this lighting, and we didn't have any money. So it was such a long thing. We owned some urban lights. So then we were taking out any fucking light we could find. We were plugging in lamps and stuff, just get enough light throughout the whole thing. And then I think, it's like a 3-minute shot. And we did, I want to say 6 or 7 takes, and we finally got it. It took us a few hours that night. And I always remember the end is Cam Riley sort of going off the building and disappearing into the abyss. And it was funny because like you don't even see him land in the film, but Cam still had like no snow on the landing. It was like a 20-foot drop to death. I remember people offering to like build a real landing, and he was just like, "No, it's fine, fuck it." I'm like, dude, no one's even gonna see it. Like, let's just make it soft. And he was intent on having it still be gnarly, even though you couldn't even see what the hell was happening. Which,
Yeah, I imagine you on your side with your knee injuries, just being like, "Dude, please spare your knees a bit."
yeah, we were really proud of that one.
Yeah, it's like a legendary intro, kind of. Um, and that's something I wanted to talk to you about a bit. Is I think that's the first maybe kind of a planned out shoot that you did, because a lot of things that happen when you shoot ski movies is 99% of it is not planned. Like you go out, you improvise, you get your stuff, and then afterwards you see what you can do with it. And now with what you're doing with commercial productions, then it's the whole contrary. Like you need to have everything 100% planned out. Like how was that transition for you of like starting to plan out shoots more?
Yeah, I think that was like what I was describing earlier about trying to inject some sort of storytelling into action sports films, which is still incredibly difficult to do because, like you're saying, you're usually a fly on the wall, just sort of like capturing what's happening. But I think those were the years for Network in '86 and continuing on that we really started to think about it in a more strategic way. I think even Mutiny has sort of a planned out intro like that. It's a little bit different aesthetically, but that was us trying to flex our filmmaking skills. You know, and I think there was a certain point where I almost had like so many filmmaking ideas that couldn't fit within a ski film that we were just be like, what could we put in the film that would like work and make sense that would allow us to like film these more like sort of narrative scenes or more creative moments. And that was probably the most fun part, you know, because no matter how you look at it, like sitting at the bottom of a down rail filming 400 tries of some guy, like it just is sort of mind numbing at some point, no matter like how passionate you are about it. So I think those were the opportunities where we all had a lot of fun from the filmmaking side and just continued to sort of like grow that passion we had.
A cool part, as you were saying, was you were trying to put in some story element, or trying to stir up the sauce. You had some interviews with the skiers' parents, and you were kind of going back and forth, and we'd see some parents saying like, yeah, I don't know what my kid is doing, and then it would like switch up to a bail. That was a really cool idea, and like it was really nice to see.
I know, yeah. I love that idea. I wish we could have even done more of it, honestly, because the shit was gold. We didn't have a ton of time to film with the parents, but yeah, I remember Noah Albaladejo's mom is hilarious in that shit. She's like, I don't want to know what Noah does in the streets, like all this shit. And Cam Riley's mom, like something about snowmobiles in the city or some shit. Because it's funny, like none of the parents when you're that young, we're never at home. We're like, and they watch the movies, but they're not like trick skiers. They don't really know what the hell we're doing, most of them. And they don't know what we're out at 2 a.m. all the time. And I think they watch the films like once a year, like the sort of mandatory, you got to watch your kids movie thing. But even when they watch it, they still don't really know what the fuck's going on. So then listening to their perspective of describing what we did was hilarious. And I wish, again, like I could do an entire movie of just that shit, just going and interviewing people's parents. But again, that was like at the beginning of the year, we would come up with all these ideas like, how can we make this film different or better or like more elevated in some way, whether it is like a little segment like that where it's unexpected characters or a cool intro. And every year we try to come up with new shit, and to be transparent is super hard. Like even towards the end, we were just trying to dream shit up, but there's so many constraints of like, people want to look cool and they need their segment. They can't have their footage spread out and they don't really want to do trip segments. And like with the format of those films that are very athlete based, it was really tough to inject those creative moments, but we did our best to always find a couple of times throughout the films to get something in there that would make it feel a little different.
So in the end, after the 86, Stept went on to do Mutiny 10 and 2, and then that was it for you guys. What made you stop making ski movies? Like I know Clayton and Cam kept doing some. Clayton, Cam, and Sean, they filmed a documentary with TGR the year after that, and they kept going. But for you personally, what was the point of saying, okay, now it's because at that point there were a lot of ski production companies that stopped one after the other.
Yeah.
What was it for you of saying, okay, I'm pulling the plug?
There's a few things that were all interconnected. I think one, which is the transition, unfortunately, like the internet started to take over, and like the full length action sports films, a lot of the brands started prioritizing less and started putting their money into like short form content for the web. So it was harder to get support behind the films. While at the same time, we were sort of like stopping, or at least myself, I was sort of stopping skiing professionally. Same with my brother. So we were ready to do something new. And then as well, the athletes, like the era of like the single athlete part was becoming the most like attractive thing, you know, and like Walsh and a couple of people did it. Clayton one year really wanted to do his own project with just him. Some of the other guys did as well. So they're like, there wasn't much of a support for the films. Most of the athletes wanted to start doing their own thing. And then at sort of serendipitously, I couldn't really ski as much anymore. And I was ready to try some new stuff. And the brands we worked with wanted to continue working with us just in different ways. So they sort of pushed us in a different direction as well. We're like the North Face and Under Armour started asking us for short form content. Like, hey, can we get like a 4-minute film with so-and-so, like a train park edit or a short story about someone going to Mount Hood in the summer? Because that's what they needed for their YouTube, and their Instagram was new, you know, and all of these channels. And they also had more money to do it. You know, I remember being dumbfounded that like Solomon, I'm trying to think who would, just using my example, would maybe pay us, you know, like $5,000 a year to sponsor the film, like a very small amount of money. And then they were offering us to go shoot for a single day for the same amount of money, or digital content, the same amount of money they pay us for an entire year. So that's like, what I think from our perspective, especially getting out of college and like needing to also like have a form of income and like be savvy to like pay rent. It was like, damn, this new era of like what the brands want is a little bit more lucrative, still just as fun, still doing a lot of the same stuff with the same people, but just different formats. And unfortunately, I think that's the era when a lot of the full length action sports films started to disappear. The companies started to either shut down or do different types of work. Some continued on. You know, I've been amazed TGR is still doing their full length film every single year. Which kudos to them for figuring it out, because I don't know if we would be able to at this point financially.
Yeah, it's a rough business model because you totally depend on brand sponsorship. Because I don't know what was the business model for you in terms of the ratio between sponsors and sales, well, DVDs and stuff like that. But when you pull out totally the part of the consumer buying in, then it gets you get dependent on sponsors a lot.
Yeah, and to be honest, and a lot of people know this, we never really had financial success with Stept and ski movies. Like it was really, even though it became a professional thing, it was basically us using all our sponsor money to cover the expenses, and then whatever budgets we got from our sponsors for the movie, we just put into the production. So it was always like a break even thing. So like not only Cam, Alex, and I, nor the other riders, we never really took any money out of the ski films. So like once we were out of college and once we didn't have ski sponsors to fund that lifestyle, you do sort of need to make a transition. And I feel fortunate that we're all getting paid to ski at the same time. So like we didn't have a real need of like, fuck, I can't make it through this winter unless like I make money. We were really like skiing professionally and making films on the side. So like, the films were paying for themselves, which is great. You know, we'd sell some at the end of the year and we'd keep that money to invest in the next film. But that's all it really was just like trying to keep it alive. And then if there was money, instead of pulling it out, just reinvesting it into the next project, which was a very like liberating way to work, because you don't have everyone concerned about how much money they're making, how much they're getting paid. It was more like we're all working on this together. None of us are really making money. We're just doing this because we fucking love it. And we're dumping all the resources in. So it was an incredible run there for like 6 or 7 years. It was really fun.
Yeah, really passion project.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, as you said, it was a weird time where writers wanted to do their own projects. People weren't buying as much DVDs. Online content was being pushed. Progression of skiing was kind of at its peak, because for a long time, the selling point was, hey, we did something this year that was never done before. But at some point, there's only so many stories from which Cam can jump off.
Absolutely. And I think like it was funny, we sort of hit a wall, no pun intended, at the same time the aerial guys did too, like the park skiers, like once everyone started doing doubles and triples, like there wasn't really like I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I do see shit on Instagram every day that I is a jaw dropping moment. So there's kids doing new shit that's impressive, but like
Yeah.
realistically, we were in an era where every year, like you're saying, there's this giant leaps and bounds of progression. And I think for a minute there, both the urban side and the park and pipe side started slowing down dramatically in terms of like the new shit that was happening. So that again, yeah, was a catalyst for some of our personal interests too, just like less fascinated.
Hmm.
But that being said, people are still doing some pretty crazy new shit these days.
Yeah. And what's a bit sad is that you see someone doing, like you said, something jaw dropping, and then you look at him and he's like, he's probably not making a dime from skiing, like not even one sponsor, but like that's the level it's at right now. Like there's so many good skiers.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's crazy. And for me these days, the shit I like with skiing is like the weird shit. Like I saw the kid the other day from Nine Nights do the switch dub 10 and do the double high five in the middle of it to his other buddy. I was like, that was some
Yeah.
cool I've ever seen. Not like who's doing the quadruple, whatever the fuck. Just like I like when people are still finding ways to get creative that hadn't been thought of in the past, because it's tough, man. There's so many people doing it, like to dream up some trick that no one's seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest qualities of B-Dog,
Yeah.
because he's a guy that's been around forever, but he's evolved with the culture. Like you look at Phil from 2005 and Phil from 2010 and Phil in 2021, and it's totally different skiers with different perspectives. Like he's evolved so much. It's crazy.
Yeah, man. He's always been fucking so good. And his last real street, I don't know if that was last year or the year before, the one that Brady filmed. I remember watching it and I was like, this shit is crazy that Phil's still on this level. Like, because I grew up with Phil and like I can barely walk, and Phil's still like literally the premier dude right now. It's
Yeah.
so impressive. Mad props to him. It's awesome.
Yeah, when we were younger, we wouldn't see a 31-year-old dude doing that stuff.
No, hell no, man.
Stept started as a fun thing with your brother, filming yourself. Now I'm talking to you, you're in your office and you're doing campaigns for the NFL, Oakley, Ford, and a bunch of other big brands. When was the transition? When did the transition start of moving to more commercial stuff? Was it like when you said doing some stuff for Solomon and Oakley?
Yeah, it was honestly like I'm still amazed at how organic the transition was. It was never like, okay, now we're commercial filmmakers all of a sudden and we're pivoting drastically. We really rode the wave of what the market was doing. Like when we started doing branded content before commercials, it was with all the same people and brands we'd always worked with in the ski industry. And luckily, a lot of those brands play in other places other than snow. Like we started doing Under Armour work with the same dudes who we're doing ski stuff with. We started doing some branded ski stuff. And then at one point, they're like, hey, we got some basketball work. Like, would you guys be interested in doing some of this as well? And we were like, hell yeah. And then all of a sudden we're on a basketball court with Steph Curry. I remember I was like,
Yeah.
that's crazy. And it was the same with the other brands, like with North Face and a few others who K2 even, like we transitioned from the ski movies to doing like little stuff like their product videos, that became like a 2-day shoot that did all their testing videos. And Solomon, we'd do their running videos, and Under Armour, we did some basketball. And then slowly we started building this portfolio that looked a lot different than just ski movies.
Well, it seems like through the years, it wasn't something that you wanted to do, but with Stepped movies and edits, you built that portfolio. So when you were ready to do some more business stuff, you already had that portfolio built. Because I remember you did some videos for Gibberish, some skiing videos, and those were like top notch. Like, I guess for anyone outside of skiing, they look at it and they're like, "Holy shit, that's great!" But once you're like, "Okay, I'm gonna go more into some lucrative stuff," then you already have that portfolio.
Yeah, And it was like, yeah, it's all that stuff, like the gibberish edits. I remember we did those. I don't even know if they paid us. It was probably like product or some shit. But like once we started having short films like that, other people perked up. Like the Do Tour was like, hey, do you guys want to come do all our athlete profiles for the year? Like we had 20 films or whatever. So then we started doing that. And then all of a sudden, after like a year or two, we had, maybe 10 or 15 clients who were all doing short form work for simultaneously. And that's when the momentum started really picking up, and we transitioned the business from just Cam, Alex, and I to start bringing on additional partners to help sort of grow the volume of work and be a little bit more strategic about where we were trying to head. The first guy we hired was Conor Schofield, who made all our first ski movies with us. So we'd each like parted ways, and we needed somebody to come in and handle a lot of the editing. Luckily, Conor was down, so it was like getting the old band back together, which was pretty funny.
Yeah, that's one crazy thing that I wanted to talk to you about, is that we can really see the influence of ski movies in like the 2000s or from any era, but from our generation, of how many filmmakers it has created. And particularly with your crew, like nowadays you're making big projects and you're still hanging out or like working with a bunch of people that come from the ski industry, whether it's yourself or Clayton or Lee Powis, or there's so many people coming from the ski industry, and not only on your crew but on many crews of like people that were ex-pro skier, ex-pro filmmakers that branched out and are now like making a living out of that.
Yeah, the list is honestly endless, man. Like it's crazy to watch. And yeah, Will DeSena, we were talking about Michael Clark. Like these guys are all extremely successful in filmmaking in their own regards. They all do a little bit of the different things, but I think it's the same can be said about a lot of action sports. If you look at a lot of the filmmakers who come from skateboarding as well, like you look at someone like Spike Jones, or photographers like Atiba. These guys are like world class. Spike Jones won an Oscar. It's like, it's crazy, but I think they all share, from what I've seen, a common theme. It's like getting cameras in kids' hands at a super young age. It's like, I think you don't find yourself filming soccer or lacrosse.
Yeah.
Who does that? But if it's an action sport that you do alone and you want to showcase what you did that day, all the action sports sort of come with filmmaking as a component of that. So if you're exposed to that at a young age and you find eventually that you have an affinity for it, it sort of makes sense that like naturally a bunch of the people who come from those sports end up in those creative fields. But yeah, I'm blown away, man, every year seeing the amount of people who I knew through skiing who now have these incredible careers in film and photography. It's sweet to watch. It's epic. And like you're saying, the fact that we still actually get to personally work with them so often, like Charlie Owens just shot our new NFL campaign with Oakley. It's crazy. It's like all the old crew we had are all now working in film. So it's been awesome to be able to continue to work with friends, even though we're in like a very different world now. It's been sweet.
Yeah, it's crazy because it's like going to film school, but 10 years in advance. Like people start touching a camera like when they get into film school, but you started when you were 12. So it's like so much more experience that you have. And as you said, there's something with the action sports culture that you don't see anywhere else, of filmmaking really linked with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you tell your story. There's no like Super Bowl at the end of the year for a lot of action sports. It's like your video part. So it's like, that's what you're working towards. If you're a skateboarder or BMXer or skier or snowboarder, it's like your form of competition sort of in a bizarre way. So people get super into it, but yeah, it breeds crazy filmmakers, man.
Yeah. And it's crazy how many also pro skiers, or, pro skier is a broad term, but there's a lot of pro skier, let's say, that went into filmmaking. When you think about yourself, of Charlie Owens, of Clayton, Michael Clark, there's JF Wool that got into filmmaking. Also, B Paul got into filmmaking. It's crazy how many of you guys, like, there's such an artistic component, it seems, to skiing that really fits well with filmmaking.
Yeah, man. And I wish I could do more stuff in the snow still. Which hopefully, I don't know, we're slowly figuring out how to get back. We actually have some snow projects we're developing right now, which would be fun to get back in the mountains. And we'd have to bring that whole short list you just named out to work with us. It'd be sick.
That would be crazy. Yeah, because you worked with Henrik Arlo last winter to produce Salute.
Yeah, and those are interesting. Like we've been friends with Henrik for so long. In full transparency, like those films were sort of like one foot in, one foot out. You know, what we help with those productions like Salute is really managing the production, doing a lot of the post production. We come in sometimes to shoot, but it's Henrik has his personal filmer, you know, Emil, who he's with all year, and then we'd pop in. So like 3 or 4 times last year, we went and shot with him. Emil shooting the whole winter, and then we work with Henrik on the creative direction on how the film's going to be structured, and then we bring it all back to LA and do all the editing here, and he comes in. So it's been really fun to support those productions, and we've done similar things with Sammy Carlson this year, with Lexi DuPont. So like we try to stay involved. Like if somebody, you know, has a bunch of footage, but they need it edited and music licensed and packaged appropriately and a creative vision, we always try to be there as a resource, especially if it's friends from like the old world, like Henrik, you know, who's been one of our friends forever. So it was really fun to work with him on Salute. And yeah, I think people are hyped on the film, man. Came out pretty good.
Yeah, it seems like you guys it's something you started doing when you were doing ski movies. It seemed like for a while it was a video shot of action and a song. That was it. And you guys really stepped it up in terms of production value, of like putting a bit of the sound of the rail or just a lot of things in the post-production that stepped up the quality. And that's something that I think showed in Salute, where you could see the stepped production value quality of...
Nice.
We could see that Stept went into there. And all same thing for Sammy, you know. It's like as if people... They'll go and take the action and film it, and then they're like, okay, hey guys, can you put your little sauce on it?
Yeah, exactly. Which we're always happy to do if anyone out there needs some help. But yeah, man, that's actually become a huge part of our business now, is just post-production specific work. So we work with a lot of the streaming partners like Amazon Studios and Paramount to do promotional stuff from existing shows. Like we do a lot of post work, or for brand partners too, even in the outdoor and action sports world. Like people have existing content or video parts they want to be made into commercials. So we've always been a huge fan of editing. It's like a big passion of ours and a huge part of what we do even today. So
as the industry is in a special point in 2021, would you see Stept getting back into ski movies?
It's an interesting question. I can say pretty definitively, I don't know if we'd move back into the ski movies we used to make, that type of like action sport athlete driven films. But I can tell you that we are currently in development on feature length projects with skiing in them, or that are based around skiing, but just a little different approach, whether it's a documentary or narrative film. So we are definitely planning on continuing to focus or to get involved in ski related projects. I think they would just look and feel a little different, but we definitely have plans to release some snow related stuff soon, which I'm excited about.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, because with all the things you have learned and the relationships you have now and the people you still know inside the industry, I think it would make such an all-star movie.
We can talk again in a year and a half and I'll have more answers, but we're getting around some stuff, which will be fun. So we'll be around.
So last time I saw Nick Martini, he was filming for Stept with no employees really. And as you said, it wasn't really lucrative. Now, what's the current state of Stept? Because I know it evolved a lot.
Yeah. And it continues to evolve, which is exciting. But it has changed a lot over the years. Primarily, well, a couple things. The type of work we do now, as most people know, we're not doing feature-length action sports films anymore. Our main focus is branded content, like short-form documentary work, sharing great stories that are supported by brands. We do a lot of commercial production, both for digital and for broadcast, in the 30, 60-second format, as well as even shorter for social. So a lot of short docs, a lot of commercial production. We're moving into more entertainment projects for film and television, for feature-length film and television, which is exciting. So that's sort of the new endeavor for Stept in the next couple of years. And that's some of the snow-related projects I was telling you about. And in addition, we sort of repositioned the business from production company to more of a creative agency. So in addition to just going out and making films, we have a creative division now that works with brands on strategy and design and copywriting, and actually writing commercials from scratch instead of their ad agencies. So the business is sort of set up with three departments: creative, production, and post. Um, and in Form Factor 2 has changed a lot. At the start, it was really just the three of us: myself, my brother, and Cam Riley. And now we have 45 of us in the LA office and another office up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming that my brother runs, which is sort of our mountain retreat. So a lot has changed. It's all been one hell of a ride. It's been super fun. And we still do a lot of work in action sports, outdoor, adventure. We're doing a lot of automotive, some comedy, and athletics in general, like a lot of the team sports, basketball, football, that stuff. But the company is continuing to change, hopefully hoping to continue growing and playing in some new worlds. I think the film and TV stuff will be a big step for us next year. So excited about some of those projects. And yeah,
So
man.
going to work on some fiction stuff?
A little bit. We're starting with some docu projects while parallel pathing some scripted work as well. So should be cool. We'll see.
It's crazy on dirait le chemin que tu as fait, which is the road you've been through.
Yeah, it's been a ride, man, and it's continuing to get complex, but it's all been incredible. We all feel super lucky. I mean, Alex, Cam, and I never could have imagined we'd be where we are today. And like we were talking about, it's been from a lot of support from our existing network. As much as the people we work with now, some of them and have no idea what the hell we used to do. A lot of them do, man. And we still are working with editors and directors and cinematographers who we grew up skiing with. So that's been one of the most fun parts, is to keep a lot of the same team in the mix as we've grown. So, but it is funny when some of the people work for us now see, like, Google something and see urban skiing and have no idea what the hell we used to do, which is often comical in the office. Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's crazy to have the perspective from someone who is not a skier at all. And
Yeah.
they see that, and it's like,
And I don't even think they know what we're doing, like a lot of the people.
yeah.
Pretty funny.
So how was it for you going from, as we said before, really improvised productions to you were talking just before about doing a 30-second commercial or 60-second commercial? How was it, like, let's say the first time you did one?
Yeah, and luckily it was a long road to get there. So we like slowly dipped our toes, but it was really fun, man. I mean, honestly, as soon as we got to do more of the planned out commercial work, that was like the creative dream, because you do really get to like map out a vision, plan it ahead of time, let your imagination run wild, but then you go in with a real plan, storyboards of exactly what moments you're going to shoot. But I love it, man. It's been awesome. And to juxtapose that, we still do a lot of documentary work that starts with more of the fly in the wall approach that we learned when we were making our ski movies. And I think that's part of the reason a lot of our documentaries come out so great, especially the short ones that we've had success with, is because we have a really unique approach to filmmaking, because we didn't all go to film school at USC. We grew up making films, chasing kids around cities in the middle of the night. So when we get those opportunities to get into like a weird, raw environment with cool characters, most of the people we work with feel extremely comfortable picking up the camera and just running with it, which still has incredible results. It's a different approach than the commercial side, but I think both are really fun and have cool, output.
Yeah, I think it's a way of seeing things that is way more out of the box than anyone with a formal education, let's say.
Yeah.
I remember a couple of years ago shooting a video clip for a music video in Montreal, and we were like on a 20th floor or something of an hotel. And I was like, okay, I think I'm just going to stretch my arms out the window and film from the outside. And I remember everyone inside were like panicking, like, what the fuck is he doing?
Yeah,
But I was just used to the risk of like saying, well, I won't drop the cam. But when I got back inside, they looked at the shot. They were like, okay, that's so dope, but don't do that again.
Yeah.
But I guess that's something you must have, of seeing ways of doing something that, formal people wouldn't do or wouldn't even think of doing.
Yeah, I mean, and we get a lot of pushback, especially when we first came to LA. The way we did things was very different than the way the traditional film community wanted them done. And it was a lot of what you're describing, like, oh, let's just go stand on the edge of the building and shoot the shit. Or like, why don't we put some kid on a rope and hang him off that thing and shoot it that way? Or like, oh, no worries. We don't need safety ropes. We're fine. We're all good. And we got a lot of pissed off people when we started down here, who come from like a very traditional film world, but it also allowed us to break through the noise because we'd do things in a different way. But yeah, the experience, like sort of the formidable years of the urban films, taught us to work in a way that still works for us very well. We've had to conform a lot,
Yeah.
but we still, try to keep it sort of loose.
Yeah. Well, I think it teaches all of us, like we're involved in those type of things, how to get things done.
Yeah,
like when there's a production constraint, it can't be as bad as being in the middle of the night in a snowstorm. And
exactly, yeah, it's funny when you hear people complaining about lunch being 5 minutes late, and you're like, you should see some of the shit we've been through. Like, because there's not gluten-free food on the buffet today.
Yeah. Well, you should bring in some DVDs, and when they bitch a bit, you just give them a DVD and say, "Hey, look at what I've done."
Yeah, exactly.
I had some questions from people on Instagram. I told them I was doing a podcast with the legend Nick Martini, and I had a few questions. Pet, Rich, or Cologne asks, personal favorite Stept film?
I'll have to say Network, because that was, my baby. I love that one.
Because that was your first
that was
hop into filmmaking, really?
Really went in on. Yeah, I still love Network. It was awesome. And it was also like the ultimate era of like all the ridiculous shit, the biggest tall tees and the highest handrails. And it was like the full on Paramount moment, like the penultimate golden era of urban skiing.
Yeah. Of like doing hand signs in front of the camera and stuff like that.
Shit that we now are embarrassed about. I love going back and watching it. It's hilarious. It's awesome.
Question from the same dude. He asks, favorite East Coast urban rail? There
is a rail that I do not remember what film it's in, but I hit it in my G Suit. So it's probably that 2010, one of the Poor Boyz or Stept movies, but it's right near Fenway Park, and it's about a 250-foot six kink that rolls. There's no kinks in it, and I still think it's one of the coolest handrails I've ever seen.
Yeah. It was in How We Livin'.
Yes, that's the one. And I got it second try, miraculously. Tried it 100 more times, never made it past the third kink. I wanted to get a trick on it or something, but the in-run sucks. But if anyone is listening to this who's still on the street grind, someone has got to go hit that thing again. It's a beauty.
Yeah, I've never seen it anywhere else.
Yeah, I haven't either. But
I also remember you getting off like really clean, but after banging the shit out of the landing.
100 feet. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's kind of weird looking back at that. Like, why is he like twisting his body like that? It's like, hey, kid,
makes no sense.
Larry Graham asks, what has been his biggest personal challenges and professional challenges with Stept?
Personal challenges, well, I guess injuries in general. I don't know if that's related to Stept. Have probably been my biggest hurdle. But personal and business challenges. I think the business was extremely tough as we grew to figure out how to do things the right and like legal and proper way when we really didn't have experience coming from other businesses. We just started the business when we were kids. So like things you would never consider with like how the companies are incorporated and legal and healthcare and all that shit that like, no one wants to deal with. And we never thought we'd have to. That for me personally was a huge hurdle that sucked. But I don't know. I don't really look at anything as hurdles, more challenges, because they're always fun to try to figure out a way to get through them. But in personal, I think giving up skiing for me was probably a tough personal challenge, and I should have done it long before I did, because I would still be skiing and jumping. and ski and POW, but I continued to push it further and further until I got so badly, my body just was disintegrated. So I would encourage anybody, if they're out there on their third ACL thinking that they're going to end up back in Dew Tour or filming a film part, to maybe consider saving the body so you can ski for another 50 years. But
yeah, that's great advice. Like, when you had your later injuries, was it on some dumb stuff, or like how did those happen?
Yeah, I think my last ACL was in Japan on a North Face trip, and I was there as a filmer, and we were fucking around outside our hotel, and I jumped over a street sign and tried like a little rodeo 5 and just landed and felt my knee just go. And I was like, well, there's number 4.
Wow. And I guess there was some alcohol involved in that?
Probably several beers. But yeah, I was probably like 3 feet off the ground and fell and my knee blew out. And I was like,
shit.
The end of the road.
Damn.
Yeah.
Same guy, Larry Graham, asks, with Stept from beginning to now, what year was the most fun and why?
I would probably say that 2011 year, just because I got to not only with Stept, but also go film with TGR and Poor Boyz everywhere. It was like a full healthy winter for the whole time. And again, that was just like good memories of being healthy, traveling all over the world, shooting a bunch with good friends. And yeah, I think that was probably one of my favorite years.
The dream. And last question, what is achievement that he is the most proud of?
Interesting. I would say personally, probably the Ford Bronco commercial we did this year, because it was the first time Ford had launched a new Bronco in over 20 years. It was their biggest global campaign of the year. And I had also really wanted to do a big automotive commercial for the past like 7 years. It was a goal. So currently, that's my answer, would be in 2020. That was a awesome moment, but I'm sure that'll change over time. Hopefully.
Yeah. Congratulations on that commercial.
Yeah.
That was insane to see it when you launched it. I saw it, and it's really cool how, from an outsider perspective, car commercials are like kind of all the same. The pickup is like on an empty field drifting, and there's rocks flying, and there's like some guy talking with a deep voice. Yeah. But you really brought the Stept sauce to car commercials. Like, even though it was really different from skiing, you could see that you guys were involved.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that was a super fun one. And now we're getting way more into the automotive stuff. So it was great, man. But hopefully more good shit to come. Maybe the next snow project will be the next big achievement. We'll see.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you having me. And it sounds like I've been in good company. I'm going to go listen to Phil and B. Paul's episodes and everybody next. But yeah, man, I really appreciate it. And hopefully we're talking again sometime. I can tell you I'm glad I am not in Montreal in January right now, because I spent many winters there at this time of year. And I remember it being negative 30 and freezing my ass off every day. So stay warm up there, man.
Cheers. So this is it for episode 10. Big thank you to Nick for coming on the podcast. It was really good talking with him. Big thank you to this episode's sponsor, Access Board Shop, Treefort Lifestyles, J Skis, and Planks Clothing. Peace.